Life in the Trenches, an in-depth look into what was the fighting like along the Western Front in World War One and the trenches. The main idea or objective of the lesson is for students to understand what trench life was like and kind of the horrors of it. To start, once again we see the map of Europe as it existed at the beginning of the war. Europe was divided up into two different alliances. The Triple Entente, which was UK, France, and Russia, versus the Triple Alliance, Austria-Hungary, Germany, Ottomans. This was the power layout for both sides. Trench warfare was a type of fighting during the First World War, in which both sides would dig in trenches that would be protected by mines, barbed wires, sand parapets. These were trenches in the ground. The trenches would also move as well, but it was all part of the plan to outlast the other side when essentially the stalemate would begin. After the plan by the Germans, the von Schlieffen plan, failed to succeed. This kind of diagram really shows the various parts of the trench. From the front lines, we had like the barbed wires, mines, poles, to the reserve trenches that were connected by the support trenches. There'll be concrete bunkhouses that had machine guns, command headquarters, in the back for artillery. It was a labyrinth of networks, both above and underground, for both sides. But it was supposed to provide maximum amount of defensive capabilities so neither side could ultimately break through. The typical and classic picture of trench. One person looking over just at the lip of the trench, protected by the sandbags, and others always in the mud, resting on guard and doing other duties. Trench fighting was so horrendous at times, the bodies of our fallen comrades would be left in the field as it was too dangerous to retrieve. The coat, a typical German helmet. But what was life like in the daily trenches? There was what's called the morning hate, which was an honor that began every day just before dawn, and the troops were woken up to guard against a dawn raid by the enemy. Dawn means just at the beginning of sunrise, where you have sunlight, but darkness as well to provide some additional protection. After the morning hate came breakfast time, when both sides would have an unofficial truce, which allowed breakfast to be eaten. This will also allow wagons of food and supplies to be delivered at various points along the trench. Patrols would then be sent into no man's land to repair barbed wire and to try to listen and pick up for any information on what the other side was doing. No man's land was the land between both sides. It literally is what the name implies. Death was always a constant companion to those serving in the trenches. Novices were cautioned against their natural inclination to pee over the trench into no man's land because many would die on their first day in the trenches as a result of snipers. Rats were also a major problem. Rats in the millions, absolute millions, would infest the trenches. There would be two main types, the brown and black rat. Both were despised, but the brown rats were especially feared, as they would gorge themselves on human remains, the eyes and liver, and they would grow to the size of a cat. Men, exasperated and were afraid of these rats, which would scamper across their faces in the dark, would attempt to rid themselves of this by various methods, by machine fire, gunfire, bayonet, clubbing the rats. They hated the rats. And one hero rat couple could produce over 900 offspring, which would spread disease and contamination everywhere. Many men in the trenches were also buried almost where they fell. Corpses would be used for food for the rats. Some of the quotes from the soldiers: "The rats were huge. They were so big they would eat a wounded man if he couldn't defend himself. I saw some rats running from under the men's great coats, enormous rats, fat with human flesh. My heart pounded as we edged towards one of the bodies. His helmet fell off, the man displayed a grimacing face, stripped of flesh, the skull bare, the eyes devoured from the yawning mouth of the rat." Rats were a major problem in the trenches, along with the mud and the actual fighting. There was also a smell. No overview of trench life can avoid the appalling reek given to many sources. The rotting decay, the overflowing latrines, the men not bathing for months. And the feet were the worst of it all. Trenchfoot. Many soldiers fighting in World War I suffered from trenchfoot, which was a fungal infection of the foot caused by cold, wet, and unsanitary conditions. Men would stand for hours in waterlogged trenches without being able to remove wet socks or boots. What happens with trenchfoot is first the foot will go numb, then red or blue, and if it's treated, it will become gangrenous and would have to be amputated. There, officers would have to walk through mud to get to the various lines and trenches, or in this picture, the mud in the communication trenches. More mud. It's always the mud. One of the most coveted items was having a clean pair of socks. There was a Christmas truce in 1914. It took place along the British and German lines around Belgium. Troops decorated trees with candles. They met outside trenches to sing Christmas carols. They gave each other gifts of food and tobacco. Even some of them played a soccer game. They even had a Christmas dinner. Many officers were not happy about that. Why? Because not a shot was fired. That's the Christmas truce there. That's the beauty.